There is a very specific warning that has reportedly been delivered behind closed doors to Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, and it is not subtle. According to sources close to the situation, he has been told that if he keeps pushing demands about his new home and how things should be done, he could end up quite literally sleeping in a staff caravan on the Sandringham estate. And the reason it has escalated to that point comes down to his behavior both now and over many years, particularly towards staff. So, let's start with where things stand right now. Andrew is no longer at Wood Farm. He has now moved into Marsh Farm, a smaller property on the Sandringham estate that was prepared for him after he left Royal Lodge. The move itself was not simple. Marsh Farm required significant work before it was considered ready. Reports mentioned rewiring, plastering, and even concerns about asbestos at one stage. It was not a quick refresh. It was a fairly involved process just to bring the house up to a livable standard. But even after that, there were additional requests. According to the Mail on Sunday, Andrew still pushed for upgrades that went beyond basic renovations. One example that drew attention was his insistence on bringing over curtains from Royal Lodge and having them altered to fit the new property. That alone reportedly came at a considerable cost. There were also artworks moved over, some of which are said to be too large for the space at Marsh Farm. A specialist firm, Gondon White, handled the relocation with reports suggesting costs in the range of £15,000 for a team. And all of this has reportedly irritated King Charles III. A source claimed that the king does not want to continue paying for what is seen as excessive or unnecessary demands, especially given that he had already agreed to make private financial provision for Andrew after he stepped back from royal duties. So, the tension is already there. But what has really brought things back into focus is the issue of how Andrew behaves with staff. Because while the home situation is ongoing, there is a much longer track record that keeps resurfacing. Former palace staff have been asked repeatedly over the years what Andrew was like to work for. And what stands out is how consistent the answers tend to be. Dickie Arbiter, who served as press secretary to the late Queen for over a decade, is someone who has generally spoken positively about senior royals. He has described King Charles III as hardworking and committed, often working late into the night. He has also spoken warmly about Princess Diana, recalling thoughtful gestures like a birthday celebration she organized for him. But when Andrew comes up, the tone changes. In an interview with the newspaper, Arbiter described him as arrogant and entitled. He also suggested that people currently working within palace communications are likely relieved they no longer have to manage issues surrounding him. That is a very specific kind of criticism, and it is coming from someone who is deeply embedded within the institution. Then there is Davies, who led royal protection during the 1990s. He oversaw hundreds of officers responsible for the safety of senior royals. Davies has said that most members of the royal family were pleasant to deal with. He described Charles as polite and spoke positively about Diana as well. But again, when Andrew is mentioned, the language shifts. He described him as rude and dismissive. And that is not coming from a casual observer. That is coming from someone who worked directly with him in high-pressure day-to-day situations. Now, when you take those long-standing descriptions and place them next to what is reportedly happening now at Marsh Farm, you start to see why concerns are being raised again. Because according to sources, the issue is not just historical. There have been suggestions that Andrew's expectations around how things are done, including interactions with staff, have continued in a similar way. The exact details are not fully public, and Buckingham Palace has declined to comment. So there is a level of uncertainty. But what we do know is that there has reportedly been a warning. Not a public statement, not something formal, but a clear message behind the scenes that his behavior, particularly towards staff, is being watched more closely. And that comes at a time when his position within the royal family is already significantly reduced. Andrew is no longer a working royal. He lost his military titles and patronages, and he stepped back from public duties following his association with Jeffrey Epstein. He has denied allegations of wrongdoing, and some aspects remain disputed. But the impact on his public role has been very clear. So, what remains is a private arrangement. King Charles has allowed him to stay within the Sandringham estate and has provided a level of financial support. But that support does not appear to be unlimited. And that is where the current situation becomes more sensitive, because when reports suggest that the king is already frustrated with renovation costs and additional requests, and at the same time there are renewed concerns about how Andrew treats staff, it creates a very specific kind of pressure. Not public pressure, but internal pressure. There is also a reputational element that cannot be ignored. Even though Andrew is largely out of the public eye, stories like this continue to surface. Former staff speaking out, sources describing tensions, reports of warnings being issued. And while the palace does not comment, those stories still shape how the situation is perceived. At this point, it is not about a single incident. It is about a pattern that has been described over many years, now intersecting with a very specific moment. His relocation to Marsh Farm and his current standing within the royal family. And that is why even relatively small details like how a renovation is handled or how staff are spoken to are getting attention. So, I want to ask you this. Do you think these warnings will actually change anything when it comes to Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor? Or is this just more of the same pattern continuing behind closed doors? Let me know what you think, because this is one of those situations where we only see parts of what is really going on. And if you want more updates like this, make sure you are subscribed.